Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 135 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is going on, brother?
What's happening, man?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Had a good week.
That's good.
I know it's not over, but so far it's been really good.
Well, that's the best thing that you got going.
You and I just finished up part 4 and the last part of the John Wayne Gacy saga.
Oh, man, that was amazing.
You know, I'm really proud of the 4 parts that we did, but at the same time, I am pretty happy to be done with Gacy. It's been a month straight of research, and the guy's kind of floating around in my head a little bit too much, to be honest with you.
It's time for you to disassociate with him for a while.
Yes, exactly. I gotta cleanse him out of my head.
So does that mean you're going to go, when we're all done with this, you go up to your TV and watch some Mary Poppins?
No.
Disney stuff?
No, probably watch something funny. Or I've been watching that Peaky Blinders. You got me onto that Peaky Blinders.
I love that Peaky Blinders.
That is a good show. I do like it.
Did you watch all your Schitt's Creek?
No, I still have some of the new season.
That's good too, though.
Yeah, I like that. It makes me laugh.
But Peaky, man, that's good.
That's a good show.
I'm already waiting for season 6.
Yeah, you'll be waiting a little bit because season 5 just came out.
Yeah. I think it's funny, though, you're wearing one of those hats.
I'm going to buy me one. I really am. So we just mentioned it, right? We know what's out on TCAT this week. It is part 4 of John Wayne Gacy. Got to tell everybody not to forget about the reviews are in.
Yeah.
New episodes out every Tuesday. We've got some really good, interesting ones coming up. So make sure you check them out.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of messages about the half keyboard one.
The half keyboard was interesting.
Yeah. I just still can't believe people paid the money for it. That's all I'm going to say.
$500+ for that? No, I'm not seeing it. We got some special things coming up on Patreon. We got 2 Patreon episodes this month. One's already out on video and audio.
Yeah.
And then we're doing a special Halloween.
It's going to be good.
That may be about Halloween or maybe about another holiday altogether. We don't know.
Either way, it's going to be scary.
Oh, sure. We'll make it scary. All right, Gibbs, we had some new Patreon supporters, so let's give some shout outs. We had MJ Houghton.
Hey, MJ.
Charles Hughes.
What's up, Charles?
Davina Shaw.
Hey, Davina.
Liz Cherry.
What's up, Liz?
Gary Lewin.
Hey, Gary.
Luke Baum.
What up, Baum?
Einat Tauman.
Well, try to be.
Carla Chapman.
Hey.
Katarina Fondi.
Katarina.
Carolyn Rickles.
What's up, Carolyn?
Debbie Knudsen.
Hey, Debbie.
Grace Kiley.
Hey, thanks, Grace.
Jennifer Goodfellow.
Hey, Jennifer.
Maggie Neve.
Hey, Maggie.
Eva Berglund.
Hey, Eva.
Haven Arley.
Hey, Haven.
Jamie Victoria Molina.
Ooh, Molina.
Amber Stolke.
What's up, Amber?
Andrew King.
Hey, Andrew.
Lisa King.
Hey, Lisa King.
They're back to back, so I don't know.
Yeah.
There could be a connection. It could be a total coincidence. Martine Spurkland.
Hey, Martine.
Gina Hamilton.
What's up, Gina?
Kathy Becker.
Hey, Kathy.
And Liz Jackson.
Hey, Liz Jackson.
So we appreciate all of that new support. Gibbs, if we go back into the vault.
Let's do it.
This week we selected Cynthia Holmes.
Oh, okay.
Been with us a long time.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. We had some PayPal support as well. We had Sarah Richmond.
Hey, Sarah.
Daniel Javier.
Javier.
Kate Massey.
Hey, Kate.
Dorothy Ballerini.
Casey Ballerini's sister.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And Patricia Lopez.
Hey, Patricia.
So appreciate that as well. All right, Gibbs, are you ready to get into this episode of Unsolved?
I am, man.
We are talking about some unsolved murders that occurred in the town of Allegany, New York. They're separate cases.
Yeah.
The tie-in is that they both happened in Allegany. The first case takes place on February 6, 1978 at the Wing Hollow Ski Resort, which was previously known as Ski Wing Resort, just outside the small town of Allegany, New York. The incident happened after midnight, but before 1 a.m., 2 men, both hired as ski trail groomers and maintenance workers, were on duty that night. The 2 men were 29-year-old Michael Forness from Cuba, New York, and 30-year-old Stephen Bender from Orleans, New York. Michael and Stephen were working on the ski trails that night when the snow grooming machine started acting up.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, because I've never even heard of a snow grooming machine. Now, admittedly, I'm not a skier. I've never skied in my life. So some of these terms are a little foreign to me.
We're not going to find you on the slopes.
No.
Yeah.
No, you definitely are not. I'm pretty sure I would snap something on the first try.
You mean on your body?
On my body.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a ski. I mean literally a bone.
Yeah. You wouldn't even make it down the bunny hill.
No. So this machine started acting up. The two men headed up to the chalet office to retrieve the tools that they needed to repair this machine. Now, it's important to note that this was hours earlier than they would have normally, on a normal night, been up at the main office. Now, it was also 9 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's chilly, man.
Very chilly.
Yeah.
So, not out of the question that they thought, hey, we have to go up to the main office anyway. Maybe let's take a little bit longer. Let's get out of the cold, warm up a little.
That's a lot below 32 freezing temperature.
It's very low.
Yeah.
That's something that would go through my head. I would be thinking that let's just take a little break, warm up.
Yeah. You would say, let's grab some coffee.
Sure. Sure. The problem is when they got into the office, they encountered armed burglars who were attempting to dig up the 170-pound floor safe out of the concrete floor in the manager's office. So we got some robbers.
Yeah.
And these two men weren't expecting it, but they surprised them. They came face to face with each other. The robbers pulled guns, and both Michael and Stephen were ordered to lay face down away from the burglars. And then they were shot, both of them, Michael and Stephen, execution style in the back of their heads.
Not once, but 3 times each.
3 times to the back of the head.
Yeah. I mean, that's making sure the job was done. That's extreme.
No, I agree with you. I think it would be very unlikely for someone to survive 3 shots from any normal size caliber gun to the back of their head at close range. So Gibbs, before we go any further, let's talk a little bit about the victims. This is an older case. We're going back to the late 70s, but there was some information out there about these 2 guys, especially Michael. Michael was very athletic. He was a strong guy, but he was also very intelligent. He had a degree in chemistry from the state college located in Cortland.
That's impressive.
It's very impressive. He tried a few careers before deciding to take a job at the Wing Hollow ski resort. He taught a few years in public school and he just didn't like it. You know, teaching's not for everyone.
Especially in a public school. It takes a really strong person with a niche to do that.
Yeah, my wife is a teacher in a public school, and there are days where she finds it very trying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's being gentle.
Yeah.
With my wording.
Yes.
He later found a job as a mason worker, and he did like that. So during the summers, he would do mason work. And then in the winters, he worked at Wing Hollow Ski Resort. Michael's dad was well known in the area. He was a veteran of World War II. He was a local postman. He also did a lot of community work and took care of injured hawks and other wild birds.
That's kind of unique, you know, to be the bird whisperer.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear you're the local postman, and again, I don't know how big of an area we're talking about, you do get to kind of be pretty well known.
Yeah.
Depending on what route you have and how big the town is. But then to say that this guy took care of injured hawks and birds, and obviously Michael's father was a guy that was willing to give his time.
Yes.
For something that really wasn't benefiting him financially. I don't know that he was going to get rich taking care of birds. I don't even know if he made any money out of it.
Probably not. Probably just did it because
it's something he wanted to do.
And he knew how to do it.
Now, when it comes to Stephen Bender, we couldn't find as much on him. There were some articles that said this guy was a hard worker. He was a stand-up guy, and very close to his family.
Yeah. There's some articles that a lot of the information would say that the family just did not want to comment on the case.
And you have that sometimes, right? You're not going to get all the information maybe that you would like to be able to talk about a victim of a crime because the family has chosen not to maybe talk to the media and share everything with them. And that's their choice.
Yeah, and you got to respect that.
Sure. So what started out as a robbery is now a homicide. 2 men are dead. The killers finished digging out the heavy floor safe and most likely placed it in some type of 4x4 and left the scene.
I mean, 175-pound safe, man. Whew.
First of all, how are you getting it up into the truck?
Yeah.
Or 4x4 or whatever vehicle you're using to take it away? And part of that is we don't know how many robbers / killers there were, but 175 pounds would take what? At the very least, 2 individuals. And those would have to be pretty strong people to lift that safe, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, the work involved of breaking it out of the concrete slab and then getting it out of there and then carrying it from the chalet to a vehicle. You're exactly right. It would probably have to at least be 2 people.
Yeah, one person's not muscling a 175-pound safe into a vehicle. I do not believe. At 3 a.m., the nighttime janitor, this was a man by the name of Donald McCartan, was making his normal rounds. And he showed up to clean the offices. And he found the murdered bodies of Michael and Stephen. He called the local police. They came out. They started their investigation. But then they called the state police for help. And to me, Gibbs, that makes a lot of sense. I think probably very quickly they realized that these killers are pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Because what seems to me in the blink of an eye, this whole thing went from a robbery to an execution.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to some place because you're going to try to lift a safe and the next thing you know, you committed a double murder, man, I mean, you had to come there prepared thinking you might do that.
Yeah. Hard to execute somebody if you don't have the tools, which means you brought a gun.
Yeah.
Which means you were ready and most likely willing to murder someone if you had to. So police found out from the resort manager that the amount of money in the safe that night was somewhere around $18,000. So when you boil it down, Gibbs, 2 men lost their lives for $18,000.
That just makes me sick, man, to lose a life over anything. But when you find out that it was $18,000, that's $9,000 per person. Really?
Yeah. Very low. I mean, obviously no amount is worth it. It was 1978.
Yeah.
Still would only be what?
40,
What do you think?
40,
50 today?
So. Yeah.
Something like that. Now, the question I have is, did the robbers know how much money was in the safe? I think there's a thought that they had to have had at least some working knowledge of the business. Number one, to know where the safe was, even that there was a safe.
Right.
And then number 2, what would be the best time to break into the main office and try to take it?
Yeah. I mean, you had to know when the most amount of cash was going to be available. How do you know that if you don't have some inside scoop? And I think the other thing is that they knew exactly what kind of tools they needed to bring to get it out of the concrete slab. So,
which is important. It probably means they knew what type of safe they were dealing with.
Right.
You know, are you going to guess? Oh, it's probably this type of safe and we need these tools.
Yeah.
So I think it makes a lot of sense that police theorize whoever did this had some knowledge, whether it came from somebody else on the inside or they used to work there. The police interviewed all the employees of the resort. They also started rounding up well-known criminals in and around this community and questioning them as well.
I would think kind of a standard practice, right?
Yeah.
Who fits the profile? Are they in and around this area? Let's pull them in and see what they know. Shake them down.
Yeah, I think pretty standard. Police discovered that just 2 weeks prior, some local teenagers broke into the office and they were caught by Michael Forness. But they later determined that this was totally unrelated to the murders. In mid-March of the same year, investigators located the safe. It was found about 5 miles away near a bridge. The safe was in the Allegany River. It had been opened up. Everything was completely emptied. Nothing left inside. As part of the investigation, police dusted the office for fingerprints. They didn't find anything other than fingerprints of people that had a right to be there.
Yeah.
They didn't find anything either on the safe. Now, it had been in the river, so I don't know if that played a part or not.
It probably, I would think it might have played some part of it.
They sent the safe off to a Canadian lab that specialized in safes. They were hoping that the lab could identify the tools used to cut a hole in the safe that allowed the killers to open it up.
Well, I guess if you could figure out the tools, then you could try to trace the tools back to who would carry those and so forth.
Yeah, I think it's smart because is the thinking these are probably somewhat specialized tools? I mean, this is not a DeWalt drill with a metal bit on it, right? Is it? I don't know.
No, I think it's probably going to be something
used to open a safe.
Kind of like the Italian job.
So the Italian job. Yeah. So if that's the case, I think that's very smart thinking because there's probably only so many places you can acquire this type of tool. Investigators also found out that there were some locals that saw 3 men that they didn't recognize as being from that area. Police had some composite sketches done, but the locals were only able to give a description of 2 of the 3 men. So they had, in the end, 2 composite sketches that they were able to release, but nothing ever developed from this. Nobody recognized these people. The investigators kept looking into leads, and one of the leads that they looked into was that this was a job possibly carried out by the mob.
Yeah, so I think when I look at this murder, robbery, it seems like it has a lot of professional qualities around it, right? I mean, they came in, they knew exactly what they were doing, where to go, they had the tools they needed, and when they encountered workers, they didn't waste any time. I mean, they executed the people and went back to get in the safe and left in a very short window of time. So to me, I mean, I can see maybe could this be mafia? You know, somebody that could pull this off, that might have experience in not only robbery, safes, but also, unfortunately, execution-style murder.
And Gibbs, we mentioned right up front, this was a short window of time. And going back to the theory of inside information, the timing is critical. You know, you have to ask the question, did the killers know that typically the workers that were out on the slopes, as well as the janitor, would not be in the office normally until 3 a.m. or later? So that's why they chose midnight to 1 a.m. to break in. If you think about it, if the janitor had somehow shown up early, he most likely would have been a third victim.
Yeah, I'm sure he's very thankful that he kept to his normal schedule that night.
Investigators interviewed some known criminals that had connections to the mob. They also interviewed some known safecrackers. And I think after learning how the safe was open, that makes a lot of sense, right? How many people have that knowledge? Not your average Joe public, right? That's very specialized, I would think. Who would know it better than a known safecracker?
Yeah, I actually had a neighbor that had a big walk-in safe.
Mm-hmm.
We used to try to see if we could break into it. We would try all the things you'd see on TV using the stethoscope.
Yeah.
We would try that. We would try so many different things, you know.
So this was just for kicks.
Yeah.
You're trying to, and this guy was okay with you messing around, trying to break into his safe.
I was there with his son, you know.
Okay.
So we were trying to break into his
So
dad's
he maybe
safe.
didn't know exactly what you were doing.
No.
But you also weren't breaking in. You were there.
We knew that's where he also kept his full bottles of alcohol. So
So they're interviewing all these people, criminals, safecrackers, everybody that they can think of, people that had connections with the mob. Nothing comes out of these interviews. But look at who they're interviewing. I mean, if these are criminals, thugs, mobsters, they're not very likely to be open to answering questions in a police interview.
No, they're going to be skilled in this arena and know what to say and not to say.
Probably much more so than your average person. They're not going to break as easily. They're not going to give themselves away, probably. Investigators even followed some leads that led them all the way to Texas and Florida. Pretty far away from New York.
Yeah, about as far as you can get in the United States, right?
South.
Yeah,
sure.
South, sure.
For sure. Not west at all.
No,
the West Coast is
twice as far.
But they followed these leads and nothing came out of it either. Now, later on in the investigation, there were hundreds of people rounded up in an unrelated sting operation in the neighboring county of Erie. So they had all these bad guys that were arrested. Police said, you know what? We'll throw out your arrest. We'll offer you up protection if anyone can give us information into the murders.
Pretty good deal.
A deal that most people would take right away, I would think, but there were no takers. So what does that mean? Nobody had any information, or they did and they weren't willing to risk it.
Well, especially if you had information against the mafia.
Well, that's the thing. If this is mob related, you better think twice.
I mean, this era, this late 70s, mafia is pretty big.
Oh, yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they, I think, are much less powerful today. Not saying they're not out there, but This is not the heyday of the, 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the John Gotti era. So the case went cold. All the interviews, all the legwork that police didn't lead to anything. Investigators continued to get tips from both people that were local and people that lived outside of the area.
Of course, they're going to check them out.
Sure.
They're going to run the full extent of searches and investigation.
The main investigator for the state police was working this case. He looked into it for 30 years.
It's a long time
to work one case.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, he had other cases as well, but that's a long time for a case to be hanging over your head. And really, the only reason why he stopped working it after 30 years is because he retired.
And, because we've seen other stories around these unsolved cases with the investigators, when they don't solve one and they retire, it haunts them.
Some of them do.
Yeah.
For sure.
They have a hard time just letting it go.
I mean, I've heard of investigators retiring and coming back for free.
Yeah.
Just to offer help because it eats at them in retirement. Yeah. That this is some big thing that they never got to solve.
Especially if they got so close, Now here they're not close, but we've heard of other ones where they've really gotten close and just couldn't close.
They thought they had their suspect, but they couldn't quite put it together. Yeah. This investigator told a local paper that he always worked each and every lead, ran them down to be sure that nothing was missed. And he talked about it, how frustrating this case was and what a travesty it was for these two men to lose their lives over $18,000. Now, his thought and what he relayed to the paper was that he really believed this was a professional robbery carried out by the mob. That was his belief.
And I think he's got some reasons to believe that.
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the facts in the case, you can make that argument. Michael's sister has come out and made statements to the press that she was back then and still is disappointed that the police have yet to find her brother's killer. Michael's dad had an extremely tough time with his son's death, as you would expect. We talked about it. This was a good guy. He was well known in the community. I think he thought with the number of connections he had, that someone would help him. Someone would reach out and say, man, you're a good guy. I heard this.
Right.
I heard this about Michael's and Stephen's murders. It didn't happen.
Don't know if it's going to help. But
Right. It was said that Michael's family never touched his room after the murder. And you hear this a lot especially in unsolved cases. The room sometimes gets frozen in time, and it becomes almost like a memorial for the remaining family members, especially the mom and dad.
It's kind of like your last way of remembering your child.
Yeah.
No
You
matter
don't
what
want to
age.
change a thing.
Nope.
Because this was Michael's room. This is the way he left it. This is the way that we're going to leave it.
And maybe when they step in that room, that's their time that they go back in time and just everything feels normal.
And I believe for a lot of families, it is. That's the place where they can connect or maybe feel most connected with their murdered loved one.
Yeah, I believe that.
And one thing that's sad about this case is Michael's dad never got to find out, never got the resolution on who murdered his son because he passed away in 2012.
Yeah. I think any parent would want to know that someone was arrested and prosecuted for what happened to their child.
And paid for what they did.
And paid for what they did.
I think it would all be tough, right? Fortunately, I've never had to go through that. But as a father, I think it'd be really tough. I also think it might be even tougher than not knowing.
Yeah.
Because you knew it was senseless, and to never find out who it was, why it happened, you just never got any of the answers you were looking for.
Why not just tie them up, take the safe, and go? Why would you have to execute them?
This is something that we don't know. Nobody can know this for a fact. But my first assumption when you were talking about that is they probably weren't wearing masks. However many robbers there were thought, okay, nobody's going to be in this office for another 3 hours. It's 1978. There's no video, surveillance. What do we need a mask for? All of a sudden, they're interrupted by these two men, and now they've seen their face. That's the only thing I can think of for why they felt like they needed to execute these two men. Because they could identify them.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So when you look at this case on the surface, it seems like a very cold case, but the state police still have it listed as active. They're still working with the local authorities. If and when any new information comes in, there's a new investigator leading up the case from the state police perspective in hopes that people will begin to talk, right? Somebody out there knows something.
Yeah.
And I think the thought on the part of this investigator is that people are getting older, and maybe as they get older, it may weigh heavier on their conscience. There could be a deathbed confession. That's always an option.
Sure.
In some of these unsolved cases that we do.
Maybe they got some religion in them now and they want to go in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were bad people. They did bad things their whole life. At the end, they want to change their ways before they die.
Yeah.
Could happen. And there is some interesting history about this ski resort. It started off known as the Grostel, which in German means Big Valley, ski area in 1958. It was said, Gibbs, that it was designed to offer the same experience, if not better, than the Alps.
It's impressive.
That seems like a lofty goal.
It is.
For New York. But it was a place that was geared towards the family. It was said, you could drop your kids off for the entire day with no worries. It had ski runs that had vertical drops over 800 feet.
That's pretty healthy.
That's something, again, I'm not going to be trying out. 11 ski runs, a chairlift. They did night skiing, and they could make their own snow.
I also read that this place turned out a couple of Olympic skiers. So
who trained there?
Yeah.
So you think about that, 1958. It sounds amazing. And it probably would have continued to be an amazing place, except for the fact that in 1968, there was a tragic accident. a ski lift went backwards and a young boy was killed.
So that probably stopped the families from just dropping their kids off.
Yeah, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt business no matter which way you look at it. Families are not going to be rushing out to the slopes after they read in the newspaper that a young boy was killed. So it was later sold and reopened as ski wing resorts by the new owners, the Stein family. So it was still a very nice place. It just wasn't as busy after the accident under these new owners. In 1975, the Steins divorced and the resort changed its name to the Wing Hollow Ski Resort, and things were really great there up until February 6, 1978. You know, after the murders, things were never going to be like they were before. No. I don't care how great you built this ski resort up to be, these tragic murders are going to be a blight.
Yeah.
Or a dark stain on this ski resort.
It's going to continue to linger there.
It eventually closed in the early 1980s, and they later sold the 600 plus acres to a family named the Walshes in 2007. So again, that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the murders, but I think it's very interesting to talk about the history of this ski resort. Where the murders do come in is when you think about it, you've got this great business,
right?
That you bought, you got back up to maybe its former glory or some percentage of.
Yeah.
You think you're doing great. These murders happen through no fault of anyone other than the robbers / killers. And it just devastates a business.
Yeah. The impact that it had.
So you and I talk a lot about the impact on the victims' families, but there's a lot of tertiary impacts.
Yeah. The outfall
that, you know, we don't always think about or talk about because we don't always find it in the research. That's why I thought this was so interesting.
So it's not only emotional impact, you also have the economic impact.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. I mean, these unsolved cases, they touch a lot of people. And again, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. Obviously, no one is affected in the same way that the victim's family is, but it doesn't mean that others aren't affected in other ways.
It's a tough case, man.
It is. It's a very tough case because number one, and it's why we have to do 2 in an episode. There's not that much information out there.
Right.
But it's interesting when you look at the facts that are known, the time frame, the theory that whoever this was had to have some level of inside knowledge. I just think they had to.
Right.
How else would they know about the safe? How else would they know about the schedule of the workers? Doesn't make any sense unless they got some help from somebody on the inside, or they used to work there.
True.
And they knew already.
Because to know what night to go to get the most money in that safe.
Yes. Which, again, still is not a ton of money. But, I mean, $18,000 in 1978, they probably looked at it as, this is easy money.
Yeah.
We don't have to hurt anybody. Nobody is going to be affected. The owner will file for insurance.
Yeah. We'll show up, sledgehammer, break it out, haul it off.
Open it with our tools or whatever. The problem is it didn't work out that way. The plan didn't go the way they thought it was going to go, and they ended up executing 2 people.
The old expect the unexpected.
All right, let's transition. Let's talk about the unsolved murder of Carol Ann Fitzmaurice. On October 20th, 1970, in the town of Allegany, Carol Ann Fitzmaurice, a nurse, was murdered in her farmhouse at 2678 West 5 Mile Road. So again, Gibbs, I think we need to talk a little bit about Carol Ann. She was 23 years old at the time she was murdered. She was known as a person that had a great heart. She was also a very beautiful woman. She came from a strong family. It was a family that really prided themselves on their values. Her dad was a World War II hero. He was an Army medic and participated in many of the intense battles of that war. At the time of her death, Carol Ann's father was working in a plant in the nearby town of Olean. Her mom worked for the county health commissioner. So it's probably not too surprising, Gibbs, that Carol Ann went into the healthcare field and became a nurse. She worked for a local doctor named Dr. F. Gerald Webster in Olean, and Carol was married to Daniel Fitzmaurice, who was a local contractor. On October 20th, 1970, Daniel came home, it was around 6 p.m., to find Carol Ann's lifeless body in the front living room floor. She was lying there face up. He could tell right away, Gibbs, that she had been stabbed many times.
Yeah, there was blood everywhere.
Everywhere. When the police got on site and were able to examine Carol Ann's body, they figured out that she had been stabbed 14 times in her abdomen, throat, and chest. It was determined that the stab that ultimately killed Carol Ann was one that cut her throat. They determined that there was no sexual assault. So local police call in the state police, and they bring in 50 troopers to help search the crime scene and to gather leads. And while the troopers are searching the home for leads, they found the murder weapon. It was about 300 yards behind the farmhouse in what was described as a somewhat shallow creek. This was a knife with a pretty long blade, and it turned out that it matched the knife set in the home. So the theory became that Carol Ann was killed with a knife taken from her own home. The police also noted that she had put some raw chicken into the oven prior to being attacked. There were no signs of a break-in. There were no signs of theft, but authorities could definitely tell there was a struggle in the living room. Carol Ann tried to fight off her attacker. And this was a murder that showed signs of rage. Police collected fingerprints at the scene. They collected them from the knife. They also collected some hair samples from Carol Ann's body. But they couldn't get any type of match, either from the fingerprints or the hair samples. Daniel told investigators about a ladder next to his house. So this was a ladder that he had been using. He had left it in a spot that morning, but it had been moved. It was no longer in the same spot.
Suspicious, right? I mean, if you had something set up outside, how you left it, and you left for the day and you came back and it was moved, and it was not something that your wife should have or would have moved.
Yeah.
It's going to make you wonder.
Especially in the same day. I mean, if we're talking 3 or 4 days, I might forget. If we're talking in the same day, I know what area I was working in. I know where I left it.
Right.
I would be pretty sure about that. So, I think it's not that hard to figure out. Authorities probably believe that the killer moved the ladder to gain entrance into the farmhouse.
Yeah.
The other thing that investigators were able to figure out was that the last time Carol Ann was seen alive was around 1 p.m. that day.
Yeah, we don't know who saw her or where they saw her at.
Investigators began looking into Carol Ann's husband, Daniel. We've talked about it many times. It has to happen. But Daniel had a solid alibi. He was at a job site in a neighboring town that was over an hour away. And they know what time he left to make it home by 6 o'clock, which is when he found Carol Ann's body. So they were able to clear him, and they began looking into other possibilities. But just a year later, Daniel was killed in a motorcycle accident and was laid to rest next to his wife in the St. Bonaventure Cemetery.
Really sad.
It is very sad. But getting back to the investigation into Carol Ann's murder, police talked to the neighbors, and the closest neighbor that they had was about a quarter mile up the road.
But she didn't see anything out of the ordinary.
But as they were interviewing other town residents, a woman came forward and told investigators that she was passing the property and saw a thin man that she described as being about 6 foot tall with a narrow face, standing near a maroon fastback type sports car. This was just about a couple hundred yards from the farmhouse. So when she tells investigators what time this was, it happens to align with the time that they believe Carol Ann was murdered. Now, we never said when they believe she was murdered because, as far as I know, Gibbs, they never released that information. We couldn't find it. And again, I think that may be one of the things that they're holding back to help either eliminate suspects or to confirm that what a suspect is saying is accurate. The other thing that this woman mentioned was that the man's car was pointed in the wrong direction for the side of the road that it was on.
I mean, that's interesting, right? I mean, to pull over on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. If you're going to pull over, why wouldn't you pull over on the side of the road that is the correct side?
Yeah, the side you came up on.
Yeah.
Why would you swing over to the other lane and then pull over? Doesn't make sense.
It's hinky.
It is hinky.
Suspicious.
Yeah.
So investigators started to focus on this man. Who is this man? They're asking people around town. Nobody else seems to know anything about him. No one other than this one woman recalled seeing a man fitting the description or a vehicle fitting the description that day. But you got to think about the community. This is not New York City. This is a little more rural. There was a great deal of panic in this community after one of its residents was murdered in her own farmhouse.
Yeah, I mean, she's just a young, sweet, innocent woman. You know, back in that day, I'm sure most people left their doors open, left the screen door right there.
I was just thinking the same thing. I mean, I don't know how rural this is, but I think it's somewhat rural. When you live in a farmhouse and you don't have a neighbor for a quarter of a mile, to me, that's rural.
That's rural.
So I think in the early 1970s, not out of the question for this to be a place where people didn't even lock their doors.
Yeah, just left it open.
And you mentioned it, Gibbs. Nice, well-respected young woman. She hasn't done anything wrong to anyone. She's at home after work, prepping dinner for her and her husband later that night. Someone comes into the home and viciously attacks her, gets on top of her, and stabs her 14 times. The question is why? We mentioned no sexual assault, so you rule that out.
I mean, this is rage.
There was a lot of stab wounds.
Yeah.
Could it have been an ex-lover that came back to town, wasn't happy that the relationship ended? Could it have been a patient at the doctor's office where Carol Ann worked that maybe developed a crush on her and became obsessed?
Could. I mean, she was very attractive and, of course, sweet as can be from everybody's accounts.
We know it happens, right? Obsessions develop that ultimately lead to murder. Or was this not a man at all? Was this a woman that was jealous for some reason? We don't know.
And I think for me, it's hard when the one witness said she's seen a tall man, thin face, out by a car. Well, when you're driving by something, I don't know how you can tell someone's 6 feet tall. I mean, you have to really be able to have like some physical object next to them to be able to measure that.
Like a car?
But even a car, I mean, a sports car.
Well, that's true.
I wouldn't be able to tell that person's 6 foot tall versus, 5'8".
Oh,
6'4".
I think I'd be in the ballpark.
Do you?
Yeah. I think I could get from like 5'10" to 6'2".
Yeah.
I don't think I would be off by 8 inches, 5'8" to 6'4". I don't think I'd be off that far, but I don't know. There are a lot of theories in this case.
Yeah.
There are some people that believe this tall, narrow-faced man that was seen by this woman was maybe not as tall, like, as you're pointing out, and maybe it was a thin woman and not a man at all.
Yeah.
There is one connection between the two cases that we've talked about in this episode. And it's the state investigator that we mentioned in the first case. He was the main investigator assigned to this one as well. And again, it was never solved. So this was another case that he talked about that haunted him essentially his whole career, because this case was even older.
Yeah.
Went back to 1970. He was probably, pretty early on, I would think.
Yeah.
Had to have been.
Probably start of his early career.
Yeah. And I think the reason that he is given for why it's so haunting, aside from the fact that a young woman was killed, that's a given. But when you look at the crime scene, right? Nothing stolen, no sexual assault, seems like almost just a random act of rage.
Because they can't find anything in her background, anything in her husband's background that would make you believe that somebody would want her dead.
Yeah, it's not like they had beef
Right.
with a bunch of people or even one person that the investigators could find. You know, we mentioned the ex-lover, but I don't know that they found anyone in her past that she jilted or anything like that.
Right.
Because I think if they had, it would have been in the research. Like, they probably would have talked about looking into somebody, either clearing them or not being able to clear them. We didn't see it.
Doesn't come up.
This is one of those really baffling cases of someone getting in, committing murder, and then getting out. Now, the question is it a local or was it someone passing through?
Right.
And I think when you get into that area of, okay, this is someone passing through, maybe saw her earlier in the day, followed her to see where she lived, committed the murder, and then was never back in that town ever. Moved on to wherever they were headed to.
Got their fix and left.
Yeah. That is a very tough case to solve, because you don't have the local who happens to get drunk in town.
Right.
And run their mouth and say something that they shouldn't say.
It's also very scary that somebody randomly would just be driving through, see a pretty woman and say, you know what? I'm going to kill her today.
Yeah. That scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
But we know it happens, right? Think back to a killer like Tommy Lynn Sells.
Yeah.
Who's riding the rails, gets off at kind of wherever he wants, hunts for a victim that he has no connection to. Those are very tough cases to solve.
Yeah, because you can't tie anything back to him.
Yeah, especially if this is a one-off murder.
Yeah.
Not saying it is, it doesn't have to be a serial killer. It could be somebody that killed one time and never killed again.
And that right there is the toughest thing that you could ever try to solve.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very tough case. The other thing that the investigators talked about is that, he has to see these families in town, the ones that are still living. That's tough, because what's he going to tell them over the years?
Yeah.
He has no leads. He really has no answers for them.
To the point you would, at least I know, I would probably just go the other way to avoid that conversation, because what am I going to tell them? I don't feel like I'm getting them any resolve. So I'm going to probably avoid them.
You're saying that, I'm assuming that they haven't seen you yet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like, hey.
And then you just turn around and walk away.
No, I'm just like, if I knew they were going to probably be there, I probably wouldn't want to have that conversation.
It's a tough conversation to have.
Yes.
When you're talking about 30 plus years goes by and this is a small town, you're having to see these people on a regular basis. Carol Ann's brother lives in the area, but doesn't really, like to talk about the case, is not somebody that you're going to see a lot of quotes from in the press. And I can understand that. I think we talked about it in the first part of this episode.
Yeah.
There are people that want to talk to the press, not because they want the limelight, because they want their loved one's case to either not be forgotten, or they want to generate publicity about the case to maybe garner some additional leads or tips or whatever. I think that's one type of person.
Right.
And then I think you have other types that whatever happened has crushed them as it does most people. And they just don't want to talk about it, especially to a reporter or, something like that.
They're dealing with it however they need to, and they're good with that, and they just want to move forward.
It doesn't mean that they don't want to see their loved one's killer caught.
No.
It just means that they're not up for having the big discussion that is later going to then be published in the paper.
They don't want to have to relive the same conversation again and again because it's going to bring up those memories they don't want to have to recall.
Nothing new has really come out lately about this case, but the investigators keep looking into it. They keep reviewing the file. They keep going back over leads that were developed in the past, hoping that something will, catch a spark, or also making sure that nothing was missed. And I think just like in the previous case, we talked about the investigator that took over for this retired state police officer that we mentioned. He's working this case as well.
Yeah.
He's the lead investigator on this case. I do think this is going to be a very tough case to solve. Number one, it's extremely old.
Right.
When you're talking about a murder that happened in 1970, Gibbs, that's 49 years ago.
Yeah.
So
it's almost as old as I am.
Let's just assume that the perpetrator was 25 to 30 years old. Let's just assume that.
Right.
That automatically puts that person now in their 70s, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Yeah.
And that brings a lot of challenges of its own. I mean, number one, the perpetrator could be dead. People die in their 70s all the time.
Yeah.
I know we're all living longer, but the other thing is witnesses die. Now, there weren't a ton of witnesses in this case, but there were some. And the older it gets, the more people related to the case die off. So even if it's not the perpetrator, maybe it's somebody that the killer told or confided in. Well, if that person dies, they take that knowledge with them, obviously. So I think very similar to the first case, we're looking at the same type of things, right? Somebody in their golden years realizes that this is eating away at their conscience.
Right.
Or they have a deathbed confession. Now, the one big difference in this case is that they have a little bit of evidence.
Yeah, they got a little bit of DNA and some fingerprints.
So I think anytime you have that, we have seen some DNA solve some cases that are way back from the 70s. You can't rule it out.
We just don't know how good the DNA is.
That's true. And we never do. We don't know how it was collected because nobody had any freaking clue what DNA was in 1970.
Right.
They had their ways of collecting things, but they didn't know that, okay, 49 years from now, this is going to be even more important to collect it a certain way and keep it and preserve it. Yeah.
But like you said, it's going to give them another opportunity to potentially solve this case.
Absolutely right. But that's it. That's it for the Allegany murder cases. Gibbs, we got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name is Linda, and I'm a relatively new Patreon supporter. I was so excited to see the new cases from North Carolina. I actually grew up in Boone, and the Durham murders happened on my 10th birthday. And, of course, the Mann McBain murders were huge across the state. I do have one thing. I did cringe a little when you said Appalachian State University is pronounced Appalachian, and I couldn't just let that go. Another fun fact related to a case a couple of weeks ago was when I was in high school, I actually drove an Opel Manta. Not as sporty as the Opel GT, but I did love that little car. Anyway, love the show. Love you guys. Can't pick Team Mike or Team Gibby, so I just have to say Team T-Cat. Thanks.
All right. Love the voicemail. Love the fact that she had an Opel.
Love the fact she's Patreon.
Yeah, love that too. So a lot of people have corrected me over the Appalachian thing.
Right.
But in her defense, she left this voicemail a while ago.
Yeah.
We're behind on voicemails.
We are.
So it's not like she's heard it and then wanted to pile on.
And to that, she has decided she is Team Gibby.
Oh, did she send another voicemail secret?
I just didn't play it.
Okay. It was double secret.
Yeah. I didn't, yeah.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Gibby. I love your show, and I listen to it going to work. I listen to it while working. My name is Maggie Tidwell, and I'm from El Paso, Texas. That is all. I'm at home with my kitties now. I'll talk to you later. I mean, not later, but thank you for putting out the show. Bye.
Well, Maggie.
Yeah. And we did talk to her later through email.
We did.
And stuff.
And we might talk to her later tonight. She doesn't know.
Yeah.
We might call her.
We might just do it.
That sounds creepy. I shouldn't say. We're not stalking anybody.
We talked to you about this, remember?
My PO says I need to be more careful.
Yeah, you really should be.
But Maggie's awesome.
Yeah, she sent us some stuff too.
Yeah, well, she just got what? Patreon or PayPal shout out.
Yeah.
Last week she sent us something in the mailbag, and now she's getting her voicemail played.
She's like a regular.
I know. It's awesome.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, this is Josh Ramsey calling. I just wanted to let you know that I absolutely love the show. I'm trying to catch up on the Stitcher app. I'm up to about the mid-60s, but I'm also catching the new shows. I love criminology as well. I think you guys do a great job. Congratulations on 150 episodes. I think that's amazing, and I hope that there are going to be 150 more. Just keep up the great work. You guys do a great job telling the stories, and stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
I appreciate that voicemail so much.
Yes, kid. I like that.
So he's listening to everything.
Yeah.
And there will definitely be another 150 episodes.
Heck yeah.
As long as people keep listening. We'll keep putting them out. I actually got an email the other day from a good listener that had a valid question.
Do we have bad listeners?
Yeah, some of them are. No, I'm just kidding. I probably didn't phrase that perfectly. But so he had a question, and the question was, how long can you do this? How can you keep finding cases? I was like, that's the least of our problems.
Yeah.
I literally have 500 or 600 cases that I want to do on a spreadsheet. I probably get 10 to 20 new suggestions a week that aren't on the spreadsheet on top of all the ones that already are. And then you have to think about the fact that people are committing crimes every single freaking day.
Yeah. New ones are coming in.
And they get solved.
Yeah.
They eventually, all the information comes out. So that's the least of our worries is continuing to find subject matter to talk about.
And he's always interviewing for my replacement. It
Always.
really, especially what bugs me is when I show up and someone's sitting in my chair.
Well, it's a trial run. Don't worry about it.
I'm like, really? Why is he in my chair?
I just record like 5 minutes, see how they do.
Yeah.
Nobody's come close yet.
Yeah, well,
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Jade, J-A-D-E, calling from Cincinnati, so right by you guys. Want to say, love the show, long-time listener, first-time caller. But I was just wondering if you guys were familiar at all with Dave McGowan's research. It suggests that a lot of the traditional people that we consider traditional serial killers actually have military ties as well as political ties. And I didn't know if you guys just didn't agree with his research or if you guys weren't aware of it, but I think it'd be really interesting to hear your guys' take on it. So hopefully we'll be hearing that from you at some point. And like I said, love the show. Keep your own time ticking. Bye.
because of the military and political connections, we are not allowed to discuss the theory.
What Gibby is saying is that not only is he not familiar with Dave McGowan's research, he's actually not familiar with anyone's research, has never read a research paper or any type of research material in his life. Now, neither of us are familiar with this Dave McGowan's research, but I'll look into it. Now, what I will say is you and I have talked a lot about the military connections on TCAT.
Yes.
We've had a lot of serial killers that have been in the military. I don't know what Dave McGowan says about that, because I'll have to look it up.
Right.
I mean, we've postulated a number of theories, one being the time that a lot of these murders took place. A lot of these guys were in Vietnam.
Right.
So that plays a part in it. But I also think you have a lot of people that go into the military for whatever reason. They can't hack it. They don't like it. They're not able to follow the rules. They are discharged a lot of times dishonorably, we see.
Yep.
So what does that mean? That they can't follow the rules. And if they can't follow the rules there, maybe that translates into they can't follow the rules in normal society. I don't know.
Yeah. And if his theory is that these are trained killers by the government, military, politician stuff.
You're going to pass on that?
I'll pass on that. I'm not a Jason Bourne.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I don't know if that's what it is or not, but we'll check it out.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. We got to get out of here, man.
Yeah,
that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.